Almost spilled my coffee putting those down. Anyway, hi! Hey guys, what's up? My name is Dom. Welcome back to my channel. If you're new to my channel, I typically make bookish content, movie content, and anything else in between because I like to do whatever I want on this channel, and tonight is going to be bookish content. I'm sporting the wet hair look because I just took a shower. I also just ate a bunch of sour warheads, so I may or may not have a blue tongue. We are sporting this look today while I talk about my top 10 favorite books that I read in 2024. Usually I don't do this many in a video just because in the past I felt like I hadn't read enough in order to do 10, so my plan for the longest time was like anytime a year ends from 0 to 5, I'm just going to talk about my top 5 books, and then 2026 I talk about the top 6, 2027 I talk about the top 7. But I read, how many fucking books did I read last year? But I read 130 books last year, so I definitely have enough to talk about if I want to do a top 10 video, and then also some honorable mentions. So for this video, I'm going to tell you the title of the book, what I rated it, what it's about, and how I felt about the book. I'm just going to do that for books 1 through 10. My honorable mentions, I'm going to mention 5, so 11 through 15. I'm not going to go into detail at all. I'm just going to say what the book is and my star rating. The order of this video is going to go from 10 to 2, honorable mentions, and then my most favorite book of the year. So without further ado, let's jump right into the video. So at number 10, with a rating of 4.75 stars, we have Avatar: The Last Airbender, Legacy of the Fire Nation by, the author's not on the cover for some reason, Joshua Pruitt. This is a very short book, only 64 pages long, and it's letters from Uncle Iroh to Zuko. First of all, this is from 2 of my favorite characters of the show. My top 3 favorite characters of Avatar are Azula, Zuko, and Iroh. So right off the bat, I knew I was gonna love this book. And it's actually quite emotional. So this is told in a similar vein to the book Legacy, which is letters from Aang to his son Tenzin. That one I thought was just okay. My problem with it was that it was basically, I was wanting more information, like a deeper look into the lore, but it quite literally is just the plot of the OG show. And while this one kind of is, it does go deeper into it, and we also get to hear the thoughts of Iroh, because if you watch the show, it's essentially in Aang's perspective. Most of the episodes are in Aang's perspective. Very little are in Iroh's himself, so it was nice to get his feelings on things, what he felt prior to the war, how he felt during the war, and what he feels post-war. We also get to learn a bit more about his son Lu Ten. If you have not seen the show, Iroh, he had a son named Lu Ten who died during war, and there's actually a whole scene in the show that causes a lot of fans to cry. Just look up Leaves from the Vine. We don't get a ton of information about Lu Ten in the show. That's basically all we get to learn about him, but I felt like I got to know more reading these letters, because a lot of these letters are Iroh telling Zuko, you're basically my son now. I also really like the letters from Zuko to Iroh. We get them at all sorts of ages. When Zuko's 7, when he's the age he is in the show, and then when Zuko's an adult. There's also a family tree I really liked because there's a sibling that's introduced in the comics, not in the show, but we learn in this book. This book makes it canon that that sibling is now part of the royal family, even though she's not from the royal parent. It has amazing art, and it's interactive, which I thought was really fun, because these letters are in envelopes that you can pull out, and I think there's a poster in this one, I think. So yeah, if you're an Avatar fan and you like Uncle Iroh and Zuko like I do, I think you would really enjoy this book. At number 9, we have Shuna's Journey by Hayao Miyazaki. This is from the pre-Ghibli days, and it's about a prince of a very, very poor land who goes on a journey to search for grains that would help his land prosper. My review for this one, short and sweet. Like, in summary, it just feels like a wonderful magical fairy tale. I really enjoyed the gorgeous watercolor art style. So like, for example, it really makes up for the prose that tends to be a bit on the nose, but it is okay because in a story like this, the art is what pushes the plot forward. The story is in the art. And like I said, it is pre-Studio Ghibli, and you could definitely see Ghibli's influence in this book. Some of these animals do show up in future movies. So I really like seeing some of Miyazaki's beginnings, and I gave this 4.75 out of 5 stars. From here on out, the books are rated 5 stars. So at number 8, we have Tokyo Ghoul Illustrations by Shui Ishida. Tokyo Ghoul is a manga series about a boy who is half ghoul and half human, and he's trying to make a world where the two species can coexist. And this book is basically the art book. We get to see behind the scenes of certain things he drew, some of the author's commentary about different posters, different marketing material. There's no plot to this book. It's just 100% commentary. This review is also going to be short and sweet because there's not too much to say about this. I just love this book for the vibes. It showed some amazing art for my favorite manga series, and I really liked seeing the author's side comments for each one. He's a very funny man. And overall, I just had a really good time. At number 7, we have The Lost Wife by Allison Richmond. This is about an old man and an old woman who meet each other at their grandchildren's wedding, and they realize that they actually know each other because they were married during World War II. This is a book I unexpectedly fell in love with, so at this point of time, I was getting kind of tired of World War II material just because I have read so much about it, to the point I wasn't really learning anything new anymore. So I kind of had to swear off World War II nonfiction for the time being, and I thought I was tired of the fiction, but I was not upset with this book at all. I did really love it. It has 2 point of views, Lenka and Yosef, and I was actually impressed with the dual point of views because usually I don't like when there's multiple, but what I liked about this one is that they take place during 2 different time periods. We see Lenka's during the war, and then Yosef takes place post-war. And I thought that was a great way to avoid repetition, and I did actually learn new things reading this. I realized I haven't read a lot of books in the Czechoslovakian point of view, and in this book I get to learn more about what they did. I was also impressed with how their second spouses were handled, because both of them, especially Yosef, I was the most impressed with, because usually with these stories, when they're reminiscing about a life they could have had, I feel like I don't truly get to see the love with the second spouse, but in this one it was very clear that Yosef did love spouse number 2. Yes, he was missing and reminiscing about Lenka, but he was able to love spouse number 2 in his own way, and the same goes for Lenka and her second husband. And this book was quite the tearjerker. I am always a sucker for old men reminiscing about the lives they had and the woman they love, which is basically all of Yosef's point of view. And the descriptions of love were just so tender and vulnerable. Like, oftentimes, as great as this book was, oftentimes I felt like I was just listening on something too personal and something, I was intruding on a thought process, so to speak. The voice actor, because I was listening to this on audiobook, the voice actor really sold it. His voice would crack sometimes, and it punched me right in the gut. My heart physically hurt listening to this book. And another aspect I really liked about it actually is that the author was able to include a real life person in the story, because Lenka is based on a real life person, and then that real life person was turned into a separate character for the story. And I think what I really liked about this was that it was just a different kind of romance, because I don't typically reach for a romance, but in this one it's not about the here and now, it's about the what could have been and how they took that love and grew into the people they ended up being at the beginning of the book. It should be obvious that the rest of this book is told in flashback. And the epilogue leaves you to think and make your own conclusions. At number 6, we have Homegoing by Ya Giazi. This starts off with 2 half-sisters who have never met, and they enter different lives. It starts off in Ghana, and then the first sister we meet marries a rich British soldier, a white British soldier who's part of the slave trade. And then the second sister we meet is sold into slavery. And then the rest of the book tells the stories of their descendants. This is another book where I'm really impressed with the point of views. There are 14 different point of views in this book. And when I saw that, I was really worried going into it, but well done, because each chapter felt extremely fleshed out, and each character felt like their own person. I'm usually not a huge open-ending person, and all these chapters end in open endings, but I think given the context of the story, it actually works really well. 1, because we meet the descendant in the next bout of chapters, but 2, for one family line, that's just kind of the nature of slavery. Oftentimes, we don't know what happens to these people after they're sold. Like, for one of them, she lost her child, and she's never going to see that child again, and then the ending of that chapter ends in kind of a mystery. And in the child's chapter, because he doesn't know who his mother is, we never find out what happened to the mom. As sad as that just was unfortunately the nature of slavery. She did keep it realistic, and it hurt to read. I had a light bulb moment for when the title clicked, and I wish I could go into detail why, but I can't because that is spoiler territory. But I thought it was a beautiful way to conclude the story. It's a happy ending, thankfully, because a lot of depressing stuff happens in this book, and it kind of leaves you emotionally exhausted. So I'm perfectly fine with a happy ending. I'm glad it happened. But otherwise, my last compliment towards this book is that I love learning about the different cultures too. There were times where I had no idea what she was talking about, so I went to Google, looked it up real quick, got the context I needed, and I felt like I learned a lot from this book, and I highly, highly recommend it. At number 5, we have a doozy of a book, and that is Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. This is about a young, nameless protagonist who meets a much older man, and she is haunted by his late wife. Let me tell you, if you are like me and you love relationship drama that's not your own, you love reading about other people's relationship drama, you love going to Facebook and reading those comment threads that are like 1,000 comments long, This is the book for you. No relationship drama can ever top this. If yours is not I'm stuttering because I'm so excited about this. If yours is not this intense, then I don't want to hear it, because nothing can ever top this. This book is full of unlikable characters. None of them are particularly, even the nameless protagonists, none of them are particularly morally good people, but like they're super compelling because I could not put the book down. I had to know what was going to happen next. So basically, this was a train wreck I couldn't look away from. The main character is super compelling because she's a very anxious person, and she's understandably, as annoying as it could get, she was understandably worried about a lot of things, and I felt like the author captured that anxiety well. Because the main character trait of the main character is that she would make up different scenarios in her head and then get upset about them. So just like me, for real. But in all seriousness, that is what anxiety is. You worry about these worst case scenarios. You're constantly worrying about these people that they don't like you because, you know, their facial expressions slightly change. But like, realistically, these people probably don't have a thought in their head about you. So I truly related to that. I thought the anxiety was captured really well. But then also, again, as annoying as it was, like, I feel like part of you has to feel for the main character because everyone treated her so weirdly. You almost can't blame her for thinking up of these scenarios. And then you have Maxim. I usually hate terrible characters in literature because I feel like in so much, not just literature, but in movies and TV shows, so many problems could be solved if the characters would just communicate with one another. But in Maxim's case, the terrible communication skills actually worked in the story's favor because it left that sense of mystery. And then when he finally does communicate, you're like, oh shit, and the tables turn. I think one of my favorite themes of this book is identity, or lack thereof, because to me, the main character doesn't really have an identity because so much of what she does in this book is not what she not what she truly wants to do, is what she thinks is going to impress Maxim. And I think her name really encompasses this because we actually never find out what her real name is. Her name throughout this book is Mrs. De Winter, which you can argue the last name, that's not hers. That's her husband's. But even adding the Mrs. to that, the name itself, Mrs. De Winter, is not hers because there was one before her. And I think the small detail really shows how self-conscious she is and how most of her identity is just being Maxim's wife. There is also a bit of irony to their names. I don't know if this was purposeful or just me being me, but in the beginning of the book, it's said a couple times that the main character actually has a very unique first name that people have never heard of before. And I just think it's ironic that the self-conscious girl with no personality, no identity outside of her husband has this unique name, whereas this ghost of a character who takes up the whole story has the generic name of Rebecca. Which leads me to another thing I liked about this book. I actually think it's so impressive that this ghost Rebecca, she's not even alive, and yet she almost overpowers, and I don't mean that in a negative way, but she almost overpowers, she takes over the narrative. Everything everyone thinks about, it deals with her. All the actions in this book go back to her. And it just amazes me that this character, we don't really even have flashbacks for. She has this presence without actually being there, which is enhanced definitely by the ending. If my inference is correct, like, holy shit, that ending. Rebecca she's a queen, I guess I want to say. I'm hesitant to say queen, but I can't explain why because spoilers. But this book, was a ride. I can't even speak. It was a roller coaster to read. But if you have not read this book, please do. At number 4, we have 2 volumes of a webcomic that I combined into one book just because I gave both volumes 5 stars, and that is The Horizon by J.H. This is about a boy and a girl trying to survive the end of the world together. This is another graphic novel where the story is in the art. There is very little written prose in this, and what written prose there is, it is very on the nose, so to speak. There's not a lot of flowery language or figurative language, but that's because you need to look at these panels and look at each tiny detail to see what the author is trying to convey to you. And it's very simple art. In this story, both in the prose, the plot, and then the art itself, less is definitely more. He doesn't really go into great detail with the backgrounds. A lot of it is just a long road, but it's the way the author framed everything. A lot of close-up of the faces and the minuscule changes, whether it's their eyebrows popping up or their eyes changing different color to show emotion, because white eyes was shocked, black eyes was their normal. My favorite panels were actually the ones where he drew the characters really small, and sometimes they were in the middle of the panel, sometimes they were all the way to the right, sometimes they were all the way to the left, but they were just surrounded by like a vast nothingness, whether that was just one giant street or just on a field of some sort, or if they were the only ones in this giant city, or sometimes just none of that. It was just these two in a black background, and it's so simple. You wouldn't think something like that would get me, but man, it gave me like the sense of foreboding and despair. Like while reading this, I truly felt like I didn't know what was going to happen to these kids. Like in the back of my mind, I figured something bad, something terrible was always going to happen. And it's because I feel like the idea of walking in the vast nothingness scares me in a sense, like being all alone. Because that's part of this webcomic too. It makes you feel a sense of loneliness, because that's what both these kids were trying to overcome. They're trying to overcome loneliness. And the author definitely wants you to feel like these children. My reaction to the volumes are interesting, because when I was reading volume 1, I didn't have a reaction while actually reading it. Like I was reading it with a straight face. I didn't really think anything about it until I put it down. I put my phone down because I was reading it on the webcomic website, and like thinking about it was when I realized how uncomfortable volume 1 made me. Volume 2 is where I had a physical reaction. I had a very heavy reaction to the last couple chapters in volume 2. It's a concept I've seen before, but again, the art is what killed me, because not only am I, because you know, usually when you read something, you kind of have to imagine it yourself, but I'm not imagining it. I'm seeing exactly what the author intends you to see. And and I've always liked that trope. It's a father-daughter trope. I'm always a sucker for it, so that was another thing. But like, I was crying so hard. When I say crying, I don't mean like I teared up a bit or tears streaming down my face. Like I was actually gasping for air because I was sobbing so hard. And no book has truly done that to me before. I actually have read the last volume. It's only 3 volumes. I have read the last volume, but I'm going to include it in my January wrap-up, and then obviously my 2025 wrap-up. But let me tell you, I had the same reaction at one point. Gasping for air, crying. I think what makes the story harder too is that these main characters are so young. I want to say they're only about 9-10 years old. So there is a sense of innocence involved too. The story, I wouldn't say it's meant for 9 to 10 year olds. I would very much say it's intended for someone my age, like a young adult. Can we consider 27 young adult? I don't know. Because part of the story is, you know, you being an adult and knowing what the kids don't know. So like at times the sense of innocence was really cute, like when they saw the lightning bugs, but at other times it's like these kids witnessing horrific stuff for the first time that no kid should have to witness, and it really hurts your heart. Like no adult wants to see a kid go through this stuff, but sometimes they have to, and that greatly affects the story. This explores grief and trauma, and if you really do like those themes, I highly recommend this webcomic. It also explores the idea of humans causing their own problems sometimes, because I will say, going back to the less is more thing, we never find out why the world is ending, what actually caused it, but there's just little things of humans causing their own issues in the world. And it also explores the idea of enjoying the little things in life, but that's more so a volume 3 thing. But again, if you like those, if you like those themes, I highly recommend this webcomic. Actually, I just highly recommend this webcomic anyway. I have read volume 3, and I did really enjoy the ending. I thought it ended on a good note. Even if I did had to rot in bed for 2 hours after finishing it, because this story fucking killed me. And it's just so funny because like conceptually, and what happens within the plot, I feel like it's things I've seen before. So maybe that's why it made one of my top 5 books of the year. Like, it's things I've seen before. It's concepts we've all seen before, but it still affected me so greatly that I was like viscerally sobbing. Again, no book has ever made me do that before. Please read it though, so I'm not the only one suffering and rotting in bed. At number 3, we have a non-fiction book, and that is To Sleep with the Angels, The Story of a Fire by David Cowan and John Kiersten. So this is written by 2 journalists, and this is about an elementary school in Chicago that had a fire in the late 1950s, and the fire was so bad, It's the reason American schools have the rules and regulations they have today. And in this book, you get to learn about how it possibly happened, who caused it, maybe. No person was ever officially arrested for this, but these two authors do make a great case for it. You get to learn about this through a lot of survivors' point of views, through the firefighters' point of views, and then you also get to learn about the aftermath of the fire. Right off the bat, this made one of my top 3 books just because the reaction I had to it. This is simultaneously the saddest but most infuriating nonfiction book I've ever read. It's sad for obvious reasons. You are reading about children dying these violent deaths, but it's infuriating because you learn that apparently common sense is not actually that common, because so much of what caused this fire, I don't want to go into details because I don't want this video to be 2 hours long. I can go on a long, angry rant about what happened during this fire, and I do during one of my monthly wrap-ups. I'll just link that up above if you want to know more about it. But in summary, it was essentially preventable. One thing I really respect about this book is that it reads like a story rather than a textbook. That's oftentimes, if I have a problem with a nonfiction book, it's because of that. It reads like a textbook, and I don't want to read a textbook. But this reads like a story, a very respectful story. It felt very respectful to the victims that died and everyone who did survive. And it's written in a way where you really feel for some of these people. I think the firefighters chapter was the most graphic because a lot of them do go into detail about what they saw. For example, they're very honest. Some of these kids didn't even die from the fire. They died from jumping out the window to survive. Like, one guy just straight up saw a girl erupt into flames, and no one, even if that's your job, no one should have to see that, and no kid should have to go through that. Oh, my voice cracked. This is an audiobook, and I was crying at work listening to it. There's a chapter that includes interviews with the parents of the victims, and you could feel how sad they are, and also just understandably angry, because a lot of them too agree that this fire was preventable. One of the reasons the kids died was because the nuns who were their teachers, they were like, rather than get out of the building, let's just stand around, wait for the firefighters, and pray, when God literally opened doors and windows for them. And one of the parents even asks that. He's like, why didn't you just leave? It was also super informative because this is a fire I've always known about. So another reason, to go off that, another reason I like this book so much is because of how personal it does feel. Like, I grew up in Chicago. Every year on the news, I don't really see it anymore though, but growing up, every year on the news, they did a little memorial on the anniversary. They did a memorial for these kids because like 92 kids died, and 92 kids and 3 teachers, I think it was, died. My dad told me about this fire. He has a personal relationship with it in a sense because he actually has a cousin who survived this fire, and a lot of the kids moved from that neighborhood to where my dad grew up, and he remembers these kids transferring to his school. But going back to it being informative, that's really all I knew about it. I didn't know like the nuances. I didn't know what actually started it. I didn't know there was a whole trial for it. I learned more about where the rules and regulations came from today because, you know, I think keeping the fire escape unlocked is smart and common sense, but apparently, and I'm gonna leave it at that. Another thing that I did find so informative was just like the post-fire stuff. I was learning about, so the neighborhood this happened in, growing up, I was always told it was a dangerous neighborhood, never go there by yourself. But when this happened, it was actually a great neighborhood, and the fire is the reason it turned into what it's known as today. And it's actually the reason the neighborhood where my dad grew up, why it became a better neighborhood and one of the top in Chicago. You also learn about the responses around the country and I think around the world, because I think some British schools actually adopted rules and regulations because of this fire. You get to learn about people's reactions to the laws. Many of those reactions pissed me off because what do you mean you don't want to put sprinklers into your schools? So I learned a lot, and a lot of it is it's an emotionally draining book. But I still really like it because I feel like it immortalizes these poor victims, and I'm using that word just because I do see, like, again, I don't see the news making a memorial for these kids anymore, so at least this book is always here to remind us. While I do recommend this nonfiction, please be careful reading this, especially if death of children really affect you, because it doesn't really gloss over details. It does get graphic, and you know, you're reading about these kids dying a very gruesome, violent death. But it truly is a great book, which is why it made one of my top 3. At number 2, we have a book that actually shocked me. I was interested in this book, but I didn't expect to love it so much, and that is The Secret Magdalene by Kai Longfellow. So this is about the life of Mary Magdalene from when she was a young child up until her death, and it also tells the story of Jesus from the time she meets him up to his death, and it's all in her point of view. So why read this in the first place, especially if I didn't expect to love it? That's because Mary Magdalene is my favorite biblical character. She's my favorite simply because I guess there's a mystery to her. I don't know if mystery is the word I'm looking for, but there's definitely a controversy about her because a lot of people, some people think she was the prostitute that was nearly stoned. Some believe she's not. Some believe she was possessed by demons. Some believe she's not. There's historians who believe in neither of those theories. Some believe she did live like a perfectly happy life with Jesus. And I don't know, something about that just made me love her a lot. And you know what? Props to this author because this is a very engaging story that does give Mary Magdalene a sense of agency. So right off the bat, in this story, she's not the prostitute that was stoned. She actually had to run away from home, and then she pretends to be a man and educates herself at the Library of Alexandria. So having said that, I'm sure you can assume the story is not at all biblically accurate. So the author does take a lot of creative liberties, but a lot of those creative liberties are more historical take. There's a strong emphasis on Mary Magdalene and Jesus being Palestinian Jews. The way she talks about the crucifixion makes a lot more sense to me, but I did really enjoy how her version of the crucifixion was weaved with the biblical version, because everything in the Bible happens. I just really liked the behind the scenes that she created. And another historical aspect I really liked was the discussion of Jesus and Mary Magdalene as lovers. If you didn't know, there is a controversy within historians and a lot of Christian circles about whether or not Jesus and Mary Magdalene were married in real life, and I really enjoyed how Longfellow handled that. This book is also incredibly philosophical. I actually listened to this on audiobook. Olivia Savannah gifted me this for Christmas, this physical copy, and I need to reread the book because I feel like I missed a lot of it because I'm, at work trying to do things. But from what I do remember, I really liked the discussion of different cultures and how they all connect. Like, one of the things it discusses is that being the chosen one and the savior of everyone is not at all an inherently Christian concept that has come up in cultures way before the birth of Jesus. And I really like that she was able to use her education to guide her through life. And going back to the sense of agency thing, like, she didn't just follow Jesus because, he saved her and it's like, oh, love him now. She used her education to make educated guesses about what her future holds, and with her education was able to decide that Jesus is the way. And I really enjoyed the moral of this story too, or what I took from the book. To me, the moral is that we all are important and connected. A lot of what this book talks about is to embrace your individuality, but we're all connected in the sense that our individual quirks is what makes this world so perfect. We are all one. And the reason this book made number 2 on my list is because it made me feel loved and hopeful in a way a lot of other Christian media hasn't been making me feel lately. Like, a lot of modern Christian media has actually been making me feel a sense of disdain for some reason. Like, I'm just not with it. But this one felt like a hug, and it really does help that the characters are incredibly humanized, and that does include Jesus. In this story, we always talk about how Jesus is all perfect being, but in this story, he does have flaws. He has flaws that he learns and grows from and overcomes in order to make himself a better person. And to me, that is a much more relatable savior than this like omnipotent being that I'm being told to worship sometimes. And this really did actually help with some of my Catholic guilt that I have. I say I'm not with the church anymore. Sometimes I say I'm a non-believer. Sometimes I can't decide whether or not I'm a non-believer, and that leads to a lot of Catholic guilt. Like, the Catholic guilt you may see people joke about online is a very real thing, but this book really helped with that. It feels like one big hug. So if you are interested in an alternative story of Mary Magdalene, I do highly recommend this book. And before we talk about my number 1 favorite book of the year, I do want to list off 5 honorable mentions. These rankings are from number 11 to number 15. At number 11, we have Chicago by Brian Doyle, which I gave 4.75 stars. At number 12, we have Spy X Family by Tatsuya Endo, which I gave 4.5 stars. Number 13, Beloved by Toni Morrison at 4.5 stars. Number 14, Saint by Sierra Simone at 4.5 stars. And at number 15, My Darling Dreadful Thing by Johanna Van Veen at 4.5 stars. So at number 1, my most favorite book of 2024 is The Rise of Kyoshi by F.C. Yee. Avatar Avatar: The Last Airbender is my favorite show of all time, and if you don't know what that's about, it takes place in the world where people can manipulate the 4 elements: water, earth, fire, air. The Avatar can wield all 4, and in Aang's case, he has to save the world from a 100-year war. Part of the lore is that the Avatar is a reincarnation from another person, and they're able to talk to their past lives. So we do get to meet an Avatar named Kyoshi, and this book is her origin story. Disclaimer before I get into it. I will say for this book, my critical rating is different from my enjoyment rating. On a critical level, I think I would give this book like between 3 to 4 stars, just because I had some gripes with it. But at an enjoyment level, I did give it 5 out of 5 stars. And because this is a best book video, I'm not going to go into detail with the critiques. If you want to see my critiques, I will link up above the monthly wrap-up. But why did I have so much fun with this book? First of all, the expansion of the lore is insane. Like, we finally get to learn about why she looks the way she does and why she uses fans, because that was one of the first things I noticed in the show. Like, she was the only one to have fans when other avatars did it, and also the only one to wear a type of face paint. Something I really liked about Kyoshi's character and appreciated is that she actually wasn't a prodigy of her natural element. So part of the Avatar lore is that the Avatar is a prodigy of the natural element. So for example, Aang being an air nomad, he was just naturally great at air bending. He got his tattoos really early. Korra, for example, she was born in the water tribes, therefore she was great at water bending. But Kyoshi was actually pretty shit at earth bending, and it's one of the reasons she has to use the fan. It was just such a stark contrast from Aang and Korra, and I just appreciate having something new about a character, because I don't want repeats. I don't want a repeat of Aang. I don't want a repeat of Korra. I want these characters to be their own. I'm really impressed that the author was able to write around incidents that I thought the original creators wrote themselves into a wall for. I also really enjoyed all the characters in this. I really liked her group of friends, if you could so call them that. I even really liked the villains. They were fleshed out. I had a great time with them, and I just really liked Kyoshi as a character just because she wasn't what I expected. There's like this idea that the fans have about her, because at the end, in one of the last couple episodes of the OG show, she essentially tells Aang to kill Ozai, and she goes on her little monologue and says, "Without justice, there is no peace." So a lot of fans had this image in their head of her being just like this bloodthirsty character who will just kill willy-nilly, but this book showed that she is not at all like that. She's actually incredibly self-conscious, which is funny because she's known as one of the best avatars in history, but she's incredibly self-conscious. Like I said, not a prodigy. She's a criminal in this book, and she seems so much softer than the idea we all had of her in our heads. So despite the critiques I have about this book when it comes to the technical issues, based on vibes, I had a great time with this fan favorite character, and I just gave it 5 out of 5 because of the pure enjoyment I got, and I just can't wait to read more from the series. To be clear, I did read the second Kyoshi book. This year I'm going to read the Yang Chen duology, and then I will read Roku's whenever I find the time to do that. But that is it for this video. I had a great reading year in 2024, both in quantity and quality. Let me know your thoughts down below. If you like this video, give it a big thumbs up, comment, subscribe, y'all know the drill. And without further ado, I'm gonna peace out and I'll see you guys later. Ciao a tutti.